So there's been a fair bit of, I guess you can call it gaslighting, on this issue of the $2,000 checks. Weirdly enough, Newsweek came out with an article talking about the people are lying about the 2,000 checks. And if I am not mistaken, they weren't the only ones to do it. Also, on Twitter, many of the Democrats are bolstering and backing this new line about 1,400 plus 600 equals to 2,000. Yes, as a flat fact, 1,400 plus 600 equals to 2,000, but that is not what he promised. That's different than what he said. Donald Trump gave $600 as a stimulus. And all of these people have the checks. And I know Donald Trump gave the $600 stimulus because Donald Trump's name is on the check. This is from Trump, President Trump. $600. Congratulations. You're an American. So it is weird for me to hear this argument from various people saying that when Biden said 2,000, when Ossoff said 2,000, when Kamala Harris said 2,000, when Warnock said 2,000, that really what they meant is to combine 1,400 with the money that Trump gave. That's not what they said on the campaign stop. Over and over and over again, you can make that argument now. But do you even really want to make that argument now? Is this really even good politics to have this particular argument? Is there a better way to handle this as opposed to having Biden lied trending and having to kind of make this longer case instead of just saying 2,000? We didn't mean 2,000 in the overt. We meant 600 plus the 1,400. And when you combine them together, it makes it two. Yeah. You didn't say that. You didn't say that. And now you have all of these people basically backing up Joe Biden saying that everybody else is lying on Biden. Nonsense. Biden clearly said it. Ossoff clearly said it. Warnock clearly said it. And Kamala Harris clearly said it. There was no ambiguity with it. They were very clear. And I got to be honest, even from a political standpoint, this is a ridiculous fight to get into. And you will be punished for it if you don't do what you told the public you were going to do. The problem that Joe Biden and Democrats have is that they went into a red state and told the people of that red state that we are going to give you checks if you put us in office. Ossoff went so far as to say you will get them immediately. I think he even said next week at one point. What happens when you don't deliver that? That's very specific. That's not you're going to get checks in 5 years or something like that. No. You're going to get them immediately. You put us in office. We're going to do this. This is what the public needs. $600 is not enough, etc., etc., etc. And so now, all of a sudden, when we said 2,000, we really didn't mean 2,000. We meant something substantially less. And by the way, we don't even know if it's going to be 1,400. Joe Biden seems to have a willingness to compromise with this notion of bipartisanship. And just like Obama was basically cowed by a certain position of bipartisanship as a political framing, well, Biden is taking that same ridiculous tact in this kind of cult of bipartisanship. The goal is not bipartisanship for the sake of bipartisanship. That's nonsense. The goal is whether or not what you're doing is in the interest of the people who put you in that office. And in this case, from the standpoint of Biden, this was the first Democrat to win Georgia in God knows how long. And those are the first two Democrats to win the Georgia runoff, I think, ever. But Lord knows, at least without outside of the time that I was alive. So I hope you get my point. It becomes that much more pressing to deliver on this front. There's no way to know if you're going to keep Georgia. And if you burn them in the first campaign promise, they will remember this. If that is not 2,000, and if that gets negotiated down, from the Republican standpoint, any amount that you give that's less than 2,000 is better for them. People know what you said. If they can get you to negotiate that down to 1,000 or even less, it makes it look as if all of you were being entirely disingenuous. Because fact of the matter is, you didn't need to negotiate. You have the votes. And in the case of having the votes and actually not using the power that the public gave you, yeah, there will and there should be consequences for it. And one of those consequences would be, next time around, Warnock and Ossoff, who are probably in somewhat of a precarious position in general, seeing that they won in red state Georgia, or at the very least blue state this time around, but typically red state Georgia. Well, I would imagine their seats are on the line in 2 years. Not 2 years, I'm sorry. In a few years, you're going to get this situation, especially Schumer. Schumer is up in 2 years. And I would imagine Schumer, who wants to keep his a majority seat in the Senate, probably is begging to get this money out. If you remember, Schumer was the one that was begging for the $50,000 of student loan deferment. Again, to get rid of, to eliminate $50,000 in student loans. Now, the reason is obvious as to why. Like I said, Schumer runs in 2 years, so he's going to be up for an election. I would imagine he wants to maintain the Senate. And I think he realizes on some level that there are going to be consequences if it seems as if the Senate wasn't living up to the expectations that was necessary. And there's even a rumor that he's concerned about somebody like AOC primarying him coming up in 2 years. You either deliver this money or there will be consequences. And by consequences, what I mean is you will lose that Senate in a heartbeat if the public believes you promised them something and then turned around and undercut the promise once you got in office. Basically, you were talking about how big of a stud you were, and then all of a sudden went flaccid immediately after you shot your load. I would say that if the Democratic Party wanted to run the House, get rid of the filibuster, pass the legislation, and dominate. And by dominate, I mean do an agenda that is in the interests of the American public. And you don't have to worry about the stuff of potentially losing one seat or the other. What is wrong with a Congress that can actually deliberate and come up with some kind of plan going forward? Aren't we sick of this kind of ossified political system where problems and issues often fall to this thing of intransigence when nothing actually get accomplished? The public has given the Democratic Party and Joe Biden the House, the Senate, and the presidency. If you burn them after they gave you that, they won't give it to you next time. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you the opportunity for allowing me to do it. I've been watching on Twitter this back and forth, this debate, where lefties will point out, you guys said 2000, and invariably there will be a Democrat crawling out of a rock somewhere to tell you that no, he's saying 1400 plus 600 equals to 2000. At which point, somebody like me will point out, well, no, he didn't say that. He didn't have all those commas in it. He said, we'll deliver $2,000. Asif will deliver $2,000. Warnock will deliver $2,000. None of these people had commas in this, talking about 14 plus 6, etc. Does 1400 plus 600 equals to 2000? Yes. As a flat fact, from the standpoint of numbers, yes. But whether or not that equals to 2000 is a separate thing than what he said. So, and don't take my word for it. Take Biden's.
If you send John and the Reverend to Washington, those $2,000 checks will go out the door.
We will be able to pass $2,000 stimulus checks for the people next week.
We'll deliver the $2,000 stimulus checks. And that begins with the $2,000 stimulus.
When you send me and Reverend Warnock to the Senate, we will pass those $2,000 stimulus checks. You send me and Reverend Warnock to the Senate, we will pass those $2,000 stimulus checks.
They will make decisions about whether we give people a $2,000 check.
We need to pass $2,000 stimulus checks for the people.
For getting people that $2,000 in relief, direct payment.
Congress should pass $2,000 checks. President-elect Biden and Democrats are all pushing for $2,000 relief checks.
$2,000 stimulus checks.
$2,000 relief checks.
But no. But nobody said anything about $2,000. No, everybody was talking about $1,400. There's 2 minutes of that. Like, one person after the next going to Georgia, trying to get those Democrats elected in Georgia, screaming about $2,000 checks. I even think, I could be wrong, but Stacey Abrams is even in this at some point. Even Stacey Abrams in this at some point, where they're basically asking, or she's pushing about Biden pushing the $2,000 checks. Look, say what you will on this, but it would have been far better to distribute the checks, pass those checks, and tax that money back. And honestly, even if you needed to go it alone, you would have been far better going it alone. Your job at this point, I would argue, is to deliver for the American public and to get across in experiential terms, not because you say it, but because you do it, that them putting you in office, them enshrining that power to you in those branches was good to do. And you show it was good to do by what you do with the power. If you are in this kind of weird back and forth where you tell people, my plan is 1.9 trillion. You have the ability to pass it. They gave you the House and the Senate. You have the ability to pass it. And Republicans say, well, we don't want to spend 1.9 trillion. We want to spend a third of what you wanted to spend. Now, is this in the best interest of America to spend a third of what you wanted to spend? And do you engage in bipartisanship if that third is not enough, inadequate to provide for the country in the way the country needs? My point is that if you are negotiating with somebody and you come out with 1.9, and I would argue 1.9 is a floor, that's not a ceiling, and the other team comes out with a number that is dramatically too low, and that in no way deals with the real material concerns of the American public as pertaining to COVID, or for that matter, as pertaining to their the vagaries of just this kind of the needs of the physical body in this case, food, clothing, shelter, etc. If your plan doesn't accommodate that, then what is the point of bipartisanship? Why am I going to engage in bipartisanship if that bipartisanship in no way gets the public and the people who voted for me what they need in order to exist, let alone what I told them I would deliver? The point is not bipartisanship. This is not, some kind of cult of working together with opposition or whatever. That's not the point. That's not the goal at all. The goal is doing what you need to do in order to accomplish what you need to accomplish. And a large part of that, honestly, needs to be what you promised in the campaign. Now, what Biden promised was modest. And you can even make a hard case of whether he promised anything. Basically, he got in office without anybody really having any entanglements around Biden because they were so terrified of Donald Trump. So he did say he was going to do $15 minimum wage, and he did say he was going to tweak Obamacare in some particular way, and elimination of a certain amount of student debt. But this is very specific. And like I said, you risk your majority in the Senate. And mind you, it's already like 50-50. So that majority is not even there. It's an even split. But you risk that much more so, if you put the public in a situation where they believed you lied. And all of these people screaming about $2,000, do you believe that the people of Georgia and the full court press that was put in Georgia, that they are unaware that these guys were basically saying this? And that right now, various people all across the United States who were there, who could hear Democrats screaming $2,000, all of a sudden feels like they're in the lurch. And Biden, who's not going to talk to a bunch of lefties on this case, decides to go and talk to a bunch of Republicans who want to gut the bill. It's very possible that Biden ends up negotiating with himself. Think back to Obamacare. Think back to what Obama did, the way he weakened the bill over and over and over again. And then, after a song and dance, still didn't get Republican support. I'm making the point that it is in the Republicans' best interest to slow walk this. It's in the Republicans' best interest to cut this amount to as little as possible. Because at the end of the day, it's the Democrats that have the House, Senate, and the presidency. And if what Biden does is inadequate in any way, the blame goes to him. The point of this is not to go less. The point is to go higher. If you need to spend a bit of excess cash, so what? At the end of the day, if you need to tax us back, do it. But the point is to get the money out, to drop that money from helicopters, especially from the standpoint of people who are in dire needs. This is a screw up. Honestly, there should have been a far harder push on this notion of the 2,000 checks. And if you meant 1,400, you should have said 1,400. Because now you're stuck adding commas and qualifications, screwing up the political language, as opposed to, we're going to deliver on that campaign pledge. Mark my words. Mark my words. Risk this at your own peril. And I say this having a barely margin. One seat, and that's not even one seat, basically the vice presidency for the Senate. So I'll leave this here. I don't want this one to go long. I was just wanting to point out that these guys are basically trying to imply, not even trying to imply, basically it's trying to revise what was said prior, as if they weren't video about the various members of the Democratic Party saying it. And they've even jumped the shark in acting as if these guys never said it, or trying to qualify it with what he meant 1,400 plus 600 equals to whatever. Whatever. That's not what he said. He said 2,000. And honestly, again, if you're going to put yourself in a situation where you're negotiating basically with yourself, I think that's a fool's errand. And yeah, the public would not be wrong in holding you responsible for that just because you're screaming about bipartisanship. That's not the point. Do the job for the American public. Did you realize, and I'll end it here, that the House of Representatives was held by the Democratic Party for like 50 years? That seems like mind-blowing today. But fact of the matter is, why wouldn't it go to Democrats for all that time? If you had a party that is looking out for the interests of the poor and the middle class, and you have a prodigious amount of poor and middle class in comparison to, let's say, the 1%, then by definition almost, if that party is working and representing the interests of the working class, the proletariat, then they should get those votes. They should have those people backing their interests. Even in a right-wing country like America, you would think that the public or that the party can make the argument to get the public on its side of this particular debate. And for whatever particular reason, they don't seem to be able to make that argument. It's very, very weird. It's very, very bizarre. But if you, even to a modicum of due diligence in trying to work for the public, they will reward you with power. For those 50 years, give or take, I think it was like 2 terms that flipped to Republican, but everything else for that term was basically Democrat. What changed was Bill Clinton. And when Bill Clinton got in office, he started pushing through this triangulation nonsense, started caring less about the policy, or at the very least taking these kind of right-wing policies, and it dropped off. Sensibly, rationally, it dropped off. You had a lot of people who didn't have the privilege of being able to just support some random Democrat when what they needed was actual, real assistance. They needed a government to work in their interests and to work in their favor, as opposed to gutting regulations, or whether it's in the housing industry or telecommunications, or for that matter, the economy. Yeah, we needed something different. And when we didn't get that, the public recognized it and dropped the party like a hot potato, putting us in this kind of flip-flop back and forth as the public sloshes, trying to find something to attend to its needs, knowing that we're going in the wrong direction, but not necessarily being able to articulate why. Pass the checks. You pay now or you pay later. And you're going to pay later with losing the Senate. So I'll leave it here. For all those people who are like, no, Biden didn't lie. He was talking about math. It's very clear. You get your 2,000. Ossoff, you get your 2,000. Warnock, you get your 2,000. Put us in, you get your 2,000. They kept saying this constantly in stereo. And more than anything else, I would argue that the thing that put Ossoff and Warnock over the finish line was that. That race was dramatically close. And are you telling me that the 1 or 2% gap weren't people who said, oh, well, screw it, I want the check? They will remember if you don't give it to them. Like, share, and subscribe.